All righty. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another educational presentation. My name is Amiel Duncan, and today we are going to be going over dependents. So, who we are the Taxpayers Help Center, which is a nonprofit organization here in Northridge, California. We operate two tax clinics, our first one being the low-income taxpayer clinics, where we help taxpayers resolve their tax disputes with the IRS. And then we also have another clinic, which is the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Clinic, YITA, which here we also help prepare income taxes for free. And then Masu Shatoni, he is a CPA. He's the director for both of the clinics. And then my name is Amiel Duncan once again, and I am one of the directors of outreach for the LITC. Now, how can someone support us or get involved with our clinics? So individuals and businesses can support us financially by donating funds to help us expand the reach of our services. They can also volunteer their time or expertise or just spread awareness about our services. So not only do we help taxpayers here in Los Angeles County, but we also help taxpayers nationwide. And we are IRS authorized certifying acceptant agents, so CAA, for the individual taxpayer identification numbers, I-10 applications. So you can call us now for an appointment to apply for I-10 number or for any other issues that you do have relating to your taxes. So connect with us. You can come and visit us in office at 9029 Reseda Boulevard, Suite 209 in Northridge, California. You can also give us a call at 818-366-0111. And then you can also check out our website at www.taxpayershelpcenter.com. And then if you can't reach us by phone or in office, you can always send us an email at info@taxpayershelpcenter.com. And lastly, if you feel that this presentation was helpful to you and you think it could be beneficial towards someone that you know or love, you can go ahead and send them to our Facebook account, which is Taxpayers Help Center, Inc., a nonprofit tax organization. On our Facebook, we will have today's presentation as well as past ones and future ones for you to go back, check out, or send to a loved one. And then you can also stay up to date and connect it with us through our Facebook to know when we will be having more events happening. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started understanding dependents. So who are dependents? Dependents can be either a qualifying child or a qualifying relative of the taxpayer. So a spouse cannot be claimed as a dependent, and those who qualify as dependents may need to file a tax return if they meet certain filing requirements. And then examples of dependents include children, stepchildren, siblings, and parents. And lastly, if housekeepers, maids, or servants work for you, unfortunately, you cannot claim them as dependents. Now, criteria for dependency. Even if you have a qualifying child or relative, you can only claim them as a dependent if they meet these three tests. So the dependent taxpayer test, the joint return test, and citizen or residence test. So starting with the first test, dependent taxpayer test. This is where a taxpayer or their spouse, if filing jointly, who is being claimed as a dependent by another taxpayer cannot claim oops. So the claim dependent by another taxpayer cannot claim any dependents on their own tax return. And then an individual is not considered a dependent if the person who could claim them isn't required to file a tax return and either does not file or only files to get a refund of estimated or withheld taxes. Therefore, you may still claim someone else as a dependent. Okay. Now moving on to the next test, which is the joint return test. So a married individual who files a joint return cannot be claimed as a dependent unless that joint return is filed solely to claim a refund of withheld income tax or estimated tax paid. So for example, Beth, who had no income, got married in November of the tax year. Beth's husband earned $30,000 and had a filing requirement. Despite Beth's parents supporting her and paying for the wedding, they cannot claim her as a dependent because she is filing a joint return with her husband. Although Beth is not considered a dependent of her parents, they may still be eligible for other benefits, which can be discussed at a later time with whoever is helping you prepare your taxes. And then lastly, moving on to the last test, which is citizen or resident test. Now, to be claimed as a dependent, a person must be a U.S. citizen, U.S. resident alien, U.S. national, or a resident of Canada or Mexico. A U.S. citizen or U.S. national legally adopts, if a U.S. citizen or a U.S. national legally adopts a child who isn't a U.S. citizen, U.S. resident alien, or U.S. national, this requirement is still satisfied if the child lives with the taxpayer as a member of the household for the entire year. As long as all other dependency tests are met, the child can be claimed as a dependent. Now, this is also important. This also applies if the child was lawfully placed with the taxpayer for legal adoption. So if you're fostering someone or for other legal reasons, if a child has been placed with you lawfully, if they have lived with you for the entire year, you can go ahead and claim them as a dependent on your tax return. And then foreign exchange students usually do not qualify as a U.S. resident and do not meet the citizen or resident requirement. Therefore, they cannot be claimed as dependents. However, you might still be able to claim a qualifying person for a credit or other tax benefits, even if said person cannot be claimed as a dependent. Now, moving on to what are the tests for a qualifying child. So there are 5 tests. The first one being relationship test. Then we have age test, residency test, support test, and then lastly, joint return test. Now for the relationship test, to meet this requirement, the child must be one of the following: the taxpayer's son, daughter, stepchild, foster child, or descendant. So this could be like a grandchild. And then the taxpayer, it could also be the taxpayer's brother, sister, half brother, half sister, and so on and so forth. And then let me just move this down a little bit. And then an adopted child is considered the taxpayer's own child for these relationships. So kind of like I said previously, for example, an adopted brother or sister is treated as a brother or a sister of the taxpayer. This includes a child who was lawfully placed with someone for legal adoption. Now, moving on to the second test, which is the age test. Now, to meet this requirement, the child must satisfy one of the following 3 criteria. So, they must be under the age of 19 at the end of the tax year and younger than the taxpayer or the taxpayer's spouse if filing jointly. They also must be a full-time student under the age of 24 at the end of the end of the year and younger than the taxpayer or the spouse if filing jointly. And then to be considered a student, the child must be enrolled full-time for at least part of the 5 months of the year. So 5 months would technically be about a semester within college. And then lastly, for the age test on this slide, the child has to be any age if permanently and totally disabled at any time during the year. So all or in individual is considered permanently and totally disabled if they cannot engage in substantial gainful activity due to a physical or mental condition, and a doctor has determined that the condition has lasted or is expected to last for at least a year or could lead to death. So those are the requirements for being considered permanently or totally disabled. Now moving on to the third test, which is the residency test. So to meet this requirement, the child must have lived with the taxpayer for over half the year. And then the taxpayer's home can be any place where they regularly reside, not necessarily a conventional home. So for instance, a child who lived with the taxpayer in one or more homeless shelters for more than half the year would still satisfy this residency requirement. Now, there are some exceptions to the residency test. So, a child is considered to have lived with the taxpayer during times when neither the child or the taxpayer is temporarily away due to reasons like illness, education, business, vacation, military service, and so on. If a child was born or died during the year, they are treated as having lived with the taxpayer for more than half of the year if the taxpayer's home was the child's residence for more than half of the time the child was alive. And then taxpayers can claim a child as a dependent if the child was born, died, or was kidnapped during the year, as long as all other dependency requirements are met. Now, it's important to note for a child who was born and unfortunately died within the same year, a social security number is not needed, but the return cannot be filed electronically and must be mailed. And then lastly, a stillborn child cannot be claimed as a dependent on a federal return through state tax laws. Oh, sorry, those state tax laws may vary. Typically, due to the residency test, a child is considered a qualifying child of the custodial parent. However, there are special rules for divorced or separated parents or those living apart, which are addressed later in this lesson, or this presentation, I should say. And then the last exception for the residency test is that for an adopted or foster child to qualify, the child must have lived with you for more than half of 2023, meaning your home was their primary residence for over half the time since the adoption or placement, excuse me. Now, this is the fourth test. Let me get some water. So the fourth test is about support. So to pass this test, a child must not have provided more than half of their own financial support during the tax year. So this is different from the support test for qualifying relatives. Simply having the funds is considered support or isn't considered support unless they are actually used for the child's needs. Um, so benefits provided by the state, such as welfare or food stamps, are generally considered support provided by the state. If government payments are used by a recipient to support others, those payments are considered as support provided by the recipient to others. Now, for example, if a mother uses TANF payments to support her children, it is treated as support provided by her. Conversely, if a child receives a Social Security benefits used for their own needs, those benefits are considered to be provided by the child. Scholarships received by a student are not counted when determining if the child provided more than half of their own support. And then lastly, the joint return test. So to meet this test, the child can't file a joint return for the year. It's pretty straightforward. But yeah, those are the tests. And then can the child be a qualifying child of more than one person? So a child might fulfill the criteria to be the qualifying child of more than one person, but only one taxpayer can claim the child for the following benefits, except in cases where special rules for children of divorced, separated, or non-cohabiting parents apply. So um, they must. Sorry, let me move my camera. Okay, so the dependency claim, child tax credit or credit for other dependents, head of household filing status, credit for child independent care expenses, exclusion from income for dependent care benefits, earned income credit, and then premium tax credit. So when two taxpayers have the same qualifying child, only one of them can typically claim all the associated benefits for that child. They cannot divide the benefits between them. The other taxpayer will not be able to claim any benefits for that child. However, there are special rules for divorce or separated parents that might allow the non-custodial parents to claim these benefits. So that's it for the qualifying child. Moving on to test for a qualifying relative. So dependents who do not qualify as qualifying child might still qualify as qualifying relative if they meet certain criteria. In addition to the dependent taxpayer, joint return, and citizen or residence test, there are four more tests for a person to qualify as a relative. So those tests are not a qualifying child test, member of household or relationship test, the gross income test, and then the support test. Unlike a qualifying child, a qualifying relative can be any age. So the first test, which is not a qualifying child test. A child cannot be considered a taxpayer's qualifying relative if the child is neither the taxpayer's qualifying child or the qualifying child of another taxpayer. However, there's an exception. A child may still be claimed as a dependent under the qualifying relatives test if the child is also a qualifying child of another taxpayer and it's provided that the child's parent, let me add this person. Where was I at? So a child still may be claimed as a dependent under the qualifying relative test if the child is also a qualifying child of another taxpayer, and it is provided that the child's parent or the person for whom the child is a qualifying child is not required to file an income tax return and either does not file a return or files only to claim a refund of withheld or estimated tax. Oop, just lost my place. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so the second test is member of household or relationship test. So to qualify under this test, the person must either live with the taxpayer as a member of their household for the entire year or be related to the taxpayer in one of the following ways. So they could be a child, stepchild, foster child, or a descendant of any of these. They can also be brother, sister, half-brother, half-sister, stepbrother, stepsister. It could also be your father, your mother, your grandparents, or another direct ancestor, including foster parent or excluding foster parents, excuse me. And then it could also be a nephew or niece, child of the taxpayer's half-brother or half-sister, uncle or aunt, in-laws, as well. So an adopted child is considered the taxpayer's own child for the purposes of the relationships mentioned. For instance, An adopted sibling is treated as a brother or sister of the taxpayer. This also includes a child who was legally placed with the taxpayer for adoption. Relationships established through marriage are not terminated by death or divorce. And lastly, an unrelated individual who lived with a taxpayer for the entire year can also qualify under the member of household or relationship test. However, if the relationship violates local laws, such as prohibitions on cohabitation, this test is not met, even if all other criteria are satisfied. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. All righty. And then lastly, certain relatives do not need to live with you all year to qualify as dependents. These include your child, stepchild, foster child, your brother, sister, siblings, your parents, grandparents, step siblings, step parents, you're a son or daughter of your sibling, a son or daughter of a half sibling, your aunt or uncles as well. And then additionally, relationships established by marriage, such as in-law, daughter-in-law, father-in-law, etc., remain valid even after death or divorce. And then we have the gross income test. I believe this is, I want to say the second to last test. So to pass this test, the dependent's gross income for the tax year must be below a specified threshold amount. Gross income includes all money, property, and services that are not tax exempt. Additionally, for individuals who are permanently and totally disabled, income from a sheltered workshop is not counted towards this gross income limit. And then we have the support test. So the taxpayer must have provided more than 50% of the dependent's total support for the tax year. When assessing the total support amount, taxpayers need to compare their contributions with the full support received by the person from all sources, including taxable income, tax-exempt income, and loans. Social Security benefits that a child receives and uses for their own support are regarded as support provided by the child. And then a scholarship that a student receives is not counted when determining if the child provided more than half of their own support. Now, there are cases where we have multiple support agreements, which is Form 2120. So, in cases where no single individual provides more than half of a person's total support, multiple support agreements can apply. This occurs when two or more people who could potentially claim the person as a dependent collectively provide over half of the person's support. Among these individuals, those who contribute more than 10% of the person's total support and meet other qualifying relative tests can agree that one of the following or one of them will claim the person as a dependent for tax benefits. And then the taxpayer who claims the dependent must submit Form 2120, multiple support declaration, or a similar statement with their tax return. And other individuals who provide over 10% of the support must submit a written and signed statement agreeing not to claim the dependent for the tax year. The taxpayer claiming the dependent should keep a copy of this statement. And then the special rules for children of divorced or separated parents or parents who live apart. So typically, the custodial parent is considered the qualifying parent for the child. However, a child may be regarded as a qualifying child or qualifying relative of the non-custodial parent if all of the following conditions are met. The parents, or one, the parents. So they are either divorced or legally separated through divorce or separation decrees or through written separation agreements. And they have lived for the entire last 6 months of the year, lived apart for the entire last 6 months of the year, regardless of their marital status. Two, the parents provided more than half of the child support for the year. 3, the child was in the custody of one or both parents for more than half of the year. And then 4, the custodial parent provides a written declaration, Form 8332, agreeing not to claim the child as a dependent for that year, and the non-custodial parent attaches this declaration to their tax return. This special rule is an exception to the residency test for a qualifying child and the support test for a qualifying relative. Almost done. And then custodial and non-custodial parents. The custodial parent is the one with whom the child spent the most nights during the year. The other parent is the non-custodial parent. If the parents separated or divorced during the year and the child lived with both parents before the separation, the custodial parent is the one with whom the child spent the most nights for the remainder of the year. A child is considered to be living with the parent for a night if the child sleeps at the parent's home, whether the parent is there or not, or with the parent when they are away from home. And then lastly, um, revocation of release of claim to an exemption. Custodial parents can revoke a release of claim to exemption they previously granted to the non-custodial parent using Form 8332. They must notify the non-custodial parent in writing or make a reasonable effort to do so in the calendar year before the tax year in which the revocation will take effect. And then with that, that concludes our presentation on dependents and who they are. Thank you guys for listening. Once again, you can go ahead and connect with us. Here is our information. We're located in Northridge, California. You could go ahead and give us a call if you have any questions, if you need help preparing your taxes, if you need an ITIN number, if you need help with tax credits, you can go ahead and give us a call, 818-366-0111. And then I'm going to go ahead and upload this presentation onto our Facebook page later today. So if you want to go ahead and send that to a friend or check out our other presentations as well, that would be awesome. So if anyone has questions, I will be happy to answer them. But if not, that concludes everything. So thank you guys. And I hope you guys all have a great day.